So now with the implemented changes on the current VB, there's gonna be 4 types of Dragon Buffs, which basically include the Infernal Drake, which gives you attack damage and ability power, like 8, 16, 24%. The Mountain Drake, that gives you damage to epic monsters and towers as true damage. The Cloud Drake, that gives you out of combat movement speed. And the Ocean Drake, that restores 10% of your missing health and mana every couple of seconds. Looking at these changes, it seems like a good idea in general to have comp specific things coming in. So each comp can kind of pick out what they need to contest and which Drake they do not need to contest in order to get the most out of their comp specific elements. The general idea is good, but the execution is really interesting, I'd say. I don't want to say bad, because I haven't played on the PvE yet, but I think that the Fire Dragon as well as the Ocean Dragon kind of give too much to any specific comp, to be fair. Giving someone 8, 16, 24% ability on attack damage will make you steamroll any team fight. And there's no counterplay because these Dragon buffs are permanent throughout the game, as they were before, but now they're actually stronger, and they're even stronger for 2 minutes after you slay the initial Drake. So it is a bit too strong. The Ocean Drake per se basically allows you at some point to just steamroll down any lane and pick any fight you want, and just hope that the missing health and mana restoration kind of carries you through them, and it will carry you through them. So I do think that the changes are overall interesting and can pan out in any way, but I think that the execution on the Infernal Drake and the Ocean Drake buffs are just strong.
The fact that the dragons are randomized, I think, is a very bad part of the game, because to me it looks like 2 of the dragons are really not that strong. One of them is something that every team comp wants all the time, which is the Fire Dragon. There's no comp that's not going to want the Fire Dragon. And then Water is situationally really OP. Say you're playing a poke comp and the Water Dragon spawns and the enemy team randomly gets it, your comp is almost done. So you basically are so neutered, and if the Water Dragon just didn't spawn, you might have won that game. Now, the Elder Dragon is something that spawns later, and I think that's a good change. I think having another big neutral objective that the teams will want later in the game, not just having Baron, is something that is good, because it's something that just provides more incentive to fight over, more choices to make in the game, and will just as a good addition.
So the new Rift Herald is basically an objective that you take, and it's never respawning, which is obviously quite contrary to the current Rift Herald. It gives you a 20-minute buff, which is called Glimpse of the Void, and it persists through death, which is, again, different to the current Rift Herald buff. So I think that the idea behind having an objective in the early game that is going to be lasting until after the early game is a pretty interesting concept. I do think it's the right approach to the Rift Herald, because it gives the Rift Herald a longer meaning. It's going to be not something you just trade off or whatever it is and just okay, the enemy's taking turret and we don't really care, we just want to make our split pusher better for a short time, so we take that and might as well take it instead, so maybe you can take the top turret in the next 2 to 3 minutes too. But it's really going to be a thing where if you have a split pushing comp, especially a Jax or Trundle, you would want that buff. You'd think about taking this as fast as possible, not allowing the enemy team to contest it, because now it actually means a lot, because it persists for 20 minutes. Since you cannot solo it and everything like that, and you couldn't really do it before, it's going to be an investment of a whole team, or maybe just have a lane swap coming in and then contest it. I think that if you have a split pusher like Jax or Trundle, especially with the corruption charges that are obviously not specified yet in terms of damage and everything like that, I do think it's going to be a situation where the enemy team runs against a clock technically, because you are unable to be pushed out of lane, and because of the damage reduction, and if the corruption stacks are really strong, you're unable to duel him. So that means if you have a Jax Trundle or any kind of split pusher for that matter, if he has that buff, he's 100% going to get to the stage that he's going to dominate the game. So I think it's more or less a buff that sure has immediate power, but has a more long-lasting approach, because if you cannot push someone out of lane that is supposed to be punished early to mid-game, then this is becoming an issue later in the game. I think Jax can easily solo carry the game with the Rift Herald giving him time in order to ramp up to that unmovable object state. There's going to be more changes to the jungle, and now there's going to be a different blue buff and a red buff. The blue buff now grants a total of 50% ability power towards your total ability power, and there's not going to be an 8 per level anymore. The mana region is obviously a nice thing, because it's now doubled based on the max mana. But yeah, the buff duration is going to be reduced to 90 seconds, whereas the first buff clear is still like 220 seconds duration, which is something that's really interesting. I think that is a really good design, because early in the game, the junglers are really vulnerable to a certain extent, especially if they're mana heavy. So having the first clear still being as strong as it was before and not having to worry about that is really important to any kind of jungler. I think that the buff per se, or like the change in effect, kind of doesn't really step in until a very mid-game point of the game, because 50% of the total ability power compared to 2 AP per level is really a minimal trade-off. It's going to be like 1 or 2 AP more if you run a full AP page. But if you don't do that, you will actually get less AP out of that buff than you did before. So it's actually going to be weaker in the early game in terms of damage if you care about 2 or 3 AP more or less. But it's going to be better in terms of mana reaction, which is obviously a good thing, because some junglers felt like that even though their blue buff still went one of them being Kindred if you spam the Q for too much. I think it's a decent change and kind of gives more priority to blue buff, because if you deny it, you're going to allow yourself to have a short power spike of 90 seconds, and especially in mid-game or late-game AP mid laner, they're going to be stronger and way stronger than they were before during the duration of the blue buff. So there's that. The red buff change is quite interesting in a way where it rewards attack speed stacking, because there's going to be a more immediate strength to the first stick, or the first hit technically, which is quite contrary to the change in Devour towards the Bloodraror now, which basically like seems like a way weaker item and doesn't seem like a really viable option, because it seems overpriced for the price that it has. 2.6k for 40% attack speed and 3% max health only makes sense on champions that have a double hit, but even in that case it's really questionable if there's any trade-off to that. So yeah, the red buff per se, it's a good thing that it has a more immediate tick, because then you kind of have like, obviously it's harder to just or easier to just see how much damage it does, so you don't always like die off the tick as I like to do. But it's just something where I don't think it's a big change. I think it's just there, but I don't see why you would do it if you decide to basically trash an item and devour and nerf it into Bloodraror technically. Alright, so there's going to be a change to the jungle XP, and the change to the jungle XP is basically similar to the approach that they had this year already technically, where they give bonus XP on top of the material, the Hunter Talisman, and have the base experience of the camps go down. So buddy jungling, or duo jungling, how I call it, is going to be even weaker now. So sharing camps and everything like that is really better here, which basically leaves us at something where the top laners are unable to get any kind of XP in the jungle, or just little to none XP in the lane substitution, which basically means that lane subs are going to be really less good for any scaling top lane there is. So you'll have, similar to how you had in Season 2, you had Alistar market junglers, like they're staying low XP and can just like kind of gank whenever they want to, like level 2, level 3. I think the same is going to apply for top lanes in case the lane swap thing is still going to persist to certain extent. They have to be low XP and they have to kind of play like supportive roles and really play to just like gank and impact mid lanes, and not really play to get XP or scale at all.
Currently, the way turret damage works is it first scales up to 175% damage, and then if it keeps hitting the same target, it'll go up to 225% damage, and then if it switches targets, it goes back to 175, and it takes 5 shots to get all the way up there. And now they're making it take only 4 shots and stay at 225 even if it switches. So it's a lot more damage, and I think the main thing this is going to affect is 2v1s, because right now, basically nobody ever defends the turret, because it takes so many resources to actually send enough people so they don't get dove. But with this, the turret's doing significantly more damage, and you can defend maybe like 2 against 4 or something like that, and it just will be a lot more easy to defend, and it should affect 2v1s quite a bit. Right, so they're taking away a lot of the global gold from both outer and inner turrets. They're taking away 25 gold to each player, so 125 gold total. And they're adding 80 local gold to the outer turrets and taking away 75 local gold to the inner turrets. So they're basically, overall, they're taking away a decent chunk of gold from outer and inner turrets, and they're making it so you have to kind of choose who you're giving to it on the outer turret. So right now you usually give it to the AD carry. He gets like a big chunk of gold. You can get like a bigger item faster, and that'll be more in the game. But it seems like they just want turrets to be a little less impactful, and that's what will happen. They're just going to be a little less impactful. And with the changes to the neutral, like Dragon and things like that, it's just going to be less of a turret-taking game and more of a neutral objective-taking game. They're adding 40 armor and MR to turrets, but they're taking away 700 HP and making it so it's able to get penetrated by armor and MR penetration. This seems to just be making it so people who put value in a like penetration, like take like penetration runes or buying stuff like that, get value out of also killing turrets with that. Where before, marksmen don't really get that and they can just kill turrets really fast. It's going to be making it so they don't kill it as fast and people who build that kind of stuff can build it faster. It's just balancing it out a bit more. And they're also making it so that when creeps aren't around, its damage is reduced by 66.67% rather than the 200 armor and MR that it used to get. And that shouldn't really affect. No one's really killing turrets when creeps aren't around at all, and it's still going to be the same way. Alright, so they're making Grievous Wounds affect all healing now instead of just self-healing, which I think was a bad change, because when it was just self-healing, it kind of felt weird. Like, you have this thing that's supposed to remove healing, but it does sometimes it doesn't. It's just kind of this awkward kind of ability. And now it's actually like a way to counter certain champions like Soraka. Like, before this change, like right now, sometimes I don't even take Ignite versus Soraka, I'll just take Exhaust, because it doesn't really actually counter her at all. It doesn't really matter. She's still going to be healing the person you're trying to kill at full effectiveness. So this will just be a lot more intuitive and a lot just better feeling.